Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the December Ordinary Council meeting of Norfolk Island Regional Council. Today we have the Acting General Manager, Mr. Greg Roy, who is joining us while the General Manager, Mr. Andrew Roach, is on leave. So I'll start the meeting by asking Mr. Roy to recite the Statement of Respect. Please be upstanding.
The Norfolk Island Regional Council promotes a climate of respect for all. We will endeavour to inspire in our community shared civic pride by valuing and protecting our unique culture and environment, both natural and built, for the current and future generations. We, the Administrator and staff of Norfolk Island Regional Council, undertake to act with honesty and integrity, to conduct ourselves in a way that engenders trust and confidence in the decisions we make and the actions we take on behalf of the Norfolk Island community. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this island.
Thank you. Before we be seated, I haven't been notified of any condolences for this meeting. Mr. Roy, have you been notified of any yourself?
I haven't been notified of any.
Thank you. Then I ask you to be seated, please. Mr. Roy, are there any apologies?
There are no apologies.
Apart from
Mr. Andrew Roach.
Thank you. And are there any disclosures of interest?
There are no disclosures.
And I'll move to item 6.1, which is the confirmation of the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 16th of November 2022. And I advise that I have personally reviewed and checked the minutes, and I resolve that the minutes of the Ordinary Council meeting held on the 16th of November 2022 be received and noted. And I'll move to item 7, and I note that item 7 is the public access item. I note that there were no requests for public access in the lead up to this council meeting. So I'm also advised that in relation to item 8, there has not been any administrator's minute placed on the agenda for this meeting. So that brings us to item 9.1, which is the minutes of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on the 23rd of November 2022. Mr. Acting General Manager.
Mr. Administrator, I'm going to pass this over to our Manager of Corporate and Finance, Mr. Paul Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Acting General Manager, Mr. Administrator. Mr. Administrator, before you at items 9.1 and 9.2, a report on and enclosing the minutes of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meetings held on the 23rd of November and another meeting held on the 24th of November. The meeting conducted on the 23rd of November had a fairly substantial agenda in terms of the committee's annual work program covering more than a dozen items. I wouldn't propose to go through each of those items one by one, but just by way of summary, the matters addressed during that meeting incorporated an update on the internal audit program, a review of our ongoing ARIC action items, the presentation of investment reports for the months of July, August and September 2022, an assessment of our annual asset valuation methodology, an update as to the progress of the external audit, papers in relation to our website compliance, assessment of our risk management framework, information on our insurance renewals, a general governance update, particularly in terms of fraud, risk and ethical conduct, an update on Council's annual report for the 2022 financial year, an an annual self-assessment by the committee of the committee's effectiveness, and the presentation of a draft cash restriction policy for the committee's consideration. Important to note also that in addition to the members, myself and Mr. Roach, the meeting was attended and presented by Carolyn Eagle, a Director of Pacifica representing Council's internal auditors, and Mr. Administrator, of course, yourself, taking a presentation from the AREC committee. But one of the important matters arising from that presentation, and as is reflected in the minutes, is confirmation of the priority around the implementation of both internal and external audit recommendations, and ensuring we have sufficient resources, both people and financial, to ensure that those recommendations are implemented in a timely fashion. Mr. Administrator, there was a second meeting held on the 24th of November, which was attended by Jacob Sauer, the audit principal, and the purpose of that meeting was to provide the committee with some comfort around Council's ability to meet the 30th of November 2022 audit deadline, and there was some actions arising from that meeting that were carried out during the course of the following week. Mr. Administrator, the recommendations from both meetings are simply that Council notes the contents of the reports and the minutes therein.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I will deal with those two items separately, just for administrative convenience. You're correct in mentioning that I was able to attend part of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on the 23rd of November for the purpose of receiving a presentation by the AREC covering the status of things that were of importance and current on their agendas. So I resolve that the minutes of the Audit Risk and Improvement Committee meeting held on the 23rd of November 2022 be received and noted. And then in relation to item 9.1, 9.1 deals with the finalisation of the financial statements, and those matters, both the annual statements and the annual report, appear as items later in today's agenda. So I will simply resolve that the minutes of the extraordinary Audit Risk and Improvement Committee, or AREC, meeting held on the 24th of November 2022 be received and noted, and I'll move to item 10.1. Item 10.1 is the report that we receive on an annual basis, where we set the dates for the ordinary council meetings for the ensuing year. Mr. Acting General Manager, did you wish to say anything? There are a list of dates there. Is there anything you wish to add to that? Nothing I wish to add to this, Mr. Administrator, other than it follows pretty much a similar pattern that we've done this year. Thank you. I've looked at the dates are suitable, and I resolve that 1, the report presented by the General Manager titled 2023 Ordinary Meeting of Council Proposed Meeting Dates be received and noted, and 2, the schedule of meeting dates as detailed below be confirmed for the 2023 Ordinary Meetings of Council, and those dates are as set out on page 33 of the agenda for today's meeting. And I'll move to item 10.2, which is a report on the 2021-2022 annual report. Mr. Acting General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. The summary of this report today is the 21 and 22 Norfolk Island Regional Council Annual Report. This has been prepared as required under the Annual Reports Act and Local Government Act of 1993 and is now presented to Council for adoption. The annual report is comprised of the following. The annual reports of of 21-22 financial year, which highlights Council's achievements and progress towards the Community Strategic Plan, other information as prescribed within the Local Government Act and regulations, as well as the audited financial statements of 21-22. The audited financial statements will be annexed to this report. Copies of these documents will be uploaded to the Council website as prescribed and will be made available to the Minister in time. The annual report is now tabled for your consideration, Mr Administrator, in this meeting today.
Thank you. I also note that on today's agenda at item 11.2, there's an item there where the audited financial reports are to be presented to Council, and we have online one of the representatives of the audit firm that is now auditing Council's accounts, that is Forsyths, and I understand we have Mr Sauer online. Can you hear us, Mr Sauer? Okay. What I might do is, because there are two items, both of which mention the financial statements, I understand that you've been invited to make a presentation to us today on the carriage of the audit and anything of significance that you want to bring to my attention or to speak to the matters generally that are incorporated into your report. So I'll give you that opportunity now, and then we'll deal again separately with items 10.2 and 11.2 as we get to them. So, Mr Sauer.
No, he doesn't. It's a different icon.
Please bear with us while we work out the technology behind the sound here.
That should be good now.
I think I'm on. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
We hear you and we see you. So
right,
over to you, Mr Sauer.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Administrator. Just by way of background, I'm the signing principal for Forsyths Chartered Accountants for Norfolk Island Regional Council for the financial year ended 30 June 2022. This was our first year of conducting the audit. We have significant experience in the local government field. You're one of 16 of our local government entities, predominantly in New South Wales, is where we do most of our local government audits. But we've been very excited to have the opportunity to conduct the audit for Norfolk Island Regional Council. I guess the first thing that I wanted to highlight was that we issued an unqualified audit opinion. So that means that based upon all our audit procedures that we conducted to address specific risks around the financial statements, we did not identify any material misstatements. And materiality is deemed as a misstatement that would be so significant that somebody would make an incorrect financial decision whilst using the financial statement figures. So that is a really good result. That means that we weren't able to identify any material misstatements, but it does. I will preface that by saying that it doesn't mean that there could potentially be no misstatements in those financial statements. It's just that as part of our audit procedures that were conducted in accordance with the auditing standards, did not identify those. But we're reasonably confident that those financial statements are in good shape, and it's a credit to Council, the quality of the financial statements that they provided to us to audit. They were in very good shape, and we weren't, there weren't significant changes to those financial statements throughout the audit process. In terms of the key challenges that we experienced this year as part of our audit, as a first year audit, there's always challenges around you're required to test opening balances. We had to do interim to get an understanding of the controls and the control environment of Council in order to determine our audit procedures. We also then had to conduct the audit of the financial statements themselves, and for this year it was a very, very compressed time frame. So because we were appointed as auditors in August, we didn't have the luxury of coming out and doing a lot of our procedures before year end. So we had a compressed period to get those done. Council did apply for an extension of time for submission of those financial statements through to the 30th of November. And due to the significant work from the council team that worked with us, as well as my team, we were able to meet that deadline and issue our audit opinion on the 30th of November. That's sort of the crux of the auditing process. In terms of other key matters, we did not identify any material breaches of legislation that we deemed necessary to report in our report on conduct of audit. The issues that were identified in last year's report of conduct of audit by the previous auditors, they were rectified by council throughout the year, and they're no longer a breach of the Local Government Act. They've been addressed. We also did not identify any other significant matters for reporting to council. I guess I didn't want to go through all the financial statement figures as part of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions around particular areas of the financial statements, but I did want to highlight just a couple of key areas. So for the 2021-22 year, there's been a significant improvement in the net operating result of council. So the operating result from continuing operations improved from 5.6 million in 2021 through to 7.8 million in 2022, which is a good result. But what's an even better result is the net operating result before capital grants and contributions. When I do these presentations, I really like to highlight capital grant, that result, because councils do rely on a lot of grants and contributions to support their operations. So, you know, you might receive some rather big grants, and that might look make your operating result look really good. But when you actually take out capital grants and contributions, it doesn't look that great. And the reasoning why that's such a big deal is that the revenue from those grants is shown in your profit and loss statement, but the expenditure is put in your balance sheet as capitalised expenditure. So it is shown over a number of years through depreciation. So it doesn't really give you a good, you know, like for like in terms of the revenue and expenditure on those grants. And council was able to turn a $2.2 million loss before capital grants and contributions last year into a $1.2 million profit this year. So that's a really good result for council in this year. The other thing that I wanted to highlight to council is around your performance measures. So council has adopted the performance measures from the Office of Local Government, the New South Wales Office of Local Government they put out, and those performance measures are basically how the Office of Local Government has deemed if council meets these performance measures, then from their determination, it's an indicator that council has, you know, the sufficient resources and long-term prospects to I guess continue operating. So when you're meeting those ratios, it's not necessarily saying that, you know, you're going really, really well, but it is saying that from OLG's determination, they're indicators that you are actually, you know, doing what needs to be done for long-term success. Now, out of the 6 ratios that are reported, council has met 5 of those in the 2021-22 year. So that's a really good outcome. With the only ratio that you haven't met for the year being your own source operating revenue ratio. So your own source operating revenue ratio indicates, you know, how much revenue out of your total revenue is council generating yourself. So what is it that you're generating versus what are you receiving through grants and contributions? And for 2022, council was at 52.9%, with the industry benchmark being 60%. So you're close. However, the good sign around that, even though you haven't met it, is that over the past 3 years, it's been significantly improving. So back in 2020, council actually had a 28.1%. Then in 2021, it was 48.8%. and in 2022 it's at 52.9%. So although you haven't met that ratio for the last financial year, there's improvement there, so that's a positive sign. And I guess that's sort of the key areas from my audit that I wanted to highlight in today's council meeting. Do you have any questions in particular of us as auditors that you want answered as part of the meeting?
Mr. South, thank you for that information. Whereas you said that there was only one of the ratios that council hadn't met the benchmark, my understanding is that on the rates and annual charges outstanding benchmark, that the benchmark is 10% and we exceeded, or we were outside that benchmark because our number was 15.7%.
Yep, sorry,
so
Mr. Administrator. Yeah, that is another one you did not meet. Yep.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to ask what your opinion of that was in view of what you had said earlier. But that is my understanding that we haven't met the benchmark there. But what we have done in the last probably 6 to 8 months is started to move towards having a structured recovery process, which we haven't been adhering to in the past, up to and including taking legal action against ratepayers and charge payers who are not paying their rates and charges within the statutory timeframes for doing that. And we do have something of an organised resistance to the payment of rates and charges, which is of considerable concern to me. On the basis that there's an argument on Ireland about Norfolk Island having sovereignty, not being part of Australia, therefore not subject to Australian legislation, therefore not subject to the establishment of a council and the operation of the Local Government Act. And people are choosing at the moment to refuse to pay their rates based around that argument. And we have no option but to respond to that by following a procedure that, when people don't pay by the time due for payment, to have a structured recovery process in place, up to and including taking legal action to recover, and also up to and including where the rates have been delinquent for a statutory period, which can be up to 5 years, selling land for overdue rates. So this is one of the performance indicators that has concerned me, and we are now starting to do a lot of work to turn that around. So you might start to see some change in those numbers over the next 12 months as we implement that recovery program. Another thing I'd just like to comment on myself and get your opinion on, there seemed to be a dip in the cash position, which is starting to recover over the last 12 months. And that goes to the reasons behind the dismissal of the council and placing council into a period of administration. Really the trigger for council overspent beyond its resources and was put into a period of administration largely to fix that problem. Other problems as well, but that was the key problem. And you should be able to have seen through the course of this audit that is starting to turn around. The healthy result that you've referred to is part of the process towards turning that around. And of course, in the current financial year, we have implemented measures to increase rates and charges so that residents of the island who own land are now being required to make a fair contribution for the services that they receive from council by virtue of land ownership, leading to the liability to pay rates and charges. So I'm pretty confident that that cash position and our overall financial position is turning around quickly by the introduction of fairly simple measures that were pointed out to us by the Commissioner who wrote the report following the public inquiry that led to council's dismissal. So what we are proving is that this council can be financially sound if it has the courage and the strength to make decisions that lead to a position where it is, bringing in the revenue that it needs to carry out the works and services, provide the services for which our expenditures are incurred. So, through the course of the period of administration, which is is scheduled to last until the end of 2024, these are the areas that we are focusing on, and we are already having dramatic effects, and I think you will see improvements again, not just on the year that you've just audited, but at least over the next 2 years until we get to the end of the period of administration. So a bit of information for yourself. I'd like to thank you for the work that your firm has done to take this task on so late, after the end of the financial year, in fact, and to be able to, to conduct the audit, do the work that's involved, and have it all wrapped up by the end of November is something almost remarkable, for which I'm very grateful as Council's representative here today. So thank you for that. And I also know that you have acknowledged the cooperation of the staff and the support you got from the staff and the quality of the work done by the staff. That's Mr. Roach is ultimately responsible, but it's Mr. Martin's team that has produced the work that's enabled you to do the audit. So my gratitude to Council's finance team and also to Forsyth's for the speedy job that you've done on this occasion, and let's hope we get it done and we don't need an extension for the next period. So thank you very much.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Okay, so I will go back to those 2 items and deal with them separately. So the first of those 2 items was item 10.2, the 2021-2022 annual report. The report has been tabled, and I resolve that 1, Council adopts the draft 2021-2022 Norfolk Island Regional Council annual report. 2, Council delegates to the General Manager the power to make minor grammatical and formatting changes to the 2021-2022 Norfolk Island Regional Council annual report, if required, after its adoption by Council and prior to publishing the document for public access. 3, Council notes the general purpose financial statements for the year ended 30th of June 2021. 4, the progress report on the 2021-2022 delivery program and operational plan be received and noted. And 5, that a copy of the 2021-2022 annual report be posted on the Council's website and a copy provided to the department. I'll then go to item 11.2. and I'll come back in a moment to item 11.1, but item 11.2 is headed Financial Statements for the year ended 30th of June 2022, and I resolve that Council notes the audited financial reports for the year ended 30th of June 2022 have been presented in accordance with section 4191 of the Local Government Act. So resolved. So Mr. Sauer, you're welcome to watch as much of this meeting as you wish, but I'll understand if you wish to depart at this juncture.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you very much. I think I'll depart. I'll let you guys carry on with the rest of the meeting. But once again, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to working with Council going forward as well.
Thanks for your attendance today.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll move back now to item 11.1, the NERC investment report as at 31 October 2022. Mr. Acting General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator. I'll pass this report over to Mr. Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mr Administrator. Before you at item 11.1 is Council's investment report as at 31 October 2022. The purpose of this report is to detail Council's cash holdings and give specific advice on restricted funds resulting in an estimate of unrestricted cash balances at 31 October 2022. At the end of that month, Council had total cash on hand of in the order of $14.2 million. $1 million of this was held in two separate trust accounts for the Curator of Deceased Estates and the Legal Aid Trust account. Having then deducted restricted funds of $7.2 million, I report that at 31 October 2022, Council had an unrestricted cash balance of $5,980,000. Mr Administrator, important to note that that unrestricted balance is approximately $1.3 million higher than had been reported a month earlier, predominantly because of the timing of the receipt of one of the SDA invoices, and that matter had been brought to Council's attention when presenting the September investment report. So, yeah, no particular dramatic movements other than the one that had already been noted. Council continues to be forecasting a unrestricted cash position at 30th of June 2023 of just on $8 million.
Thank you, Mr Martin. And of course, that $8 million still includes the $3 million of bailout funds that Council received from the Commonwealth back at the end of 2020. So in terms of funds that Council is projecting that it will be able to generate by 30 June 2023, although it appears that we will be reaching our $8 million target, we would only be there because of the bailout funds. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr Administrator, to the tune of $3 million.
Okay, so we're well and truly on track to where we want to be from a cash perspective, but we need to be aware that some of the cash that we are holding is that bailout money. So we're not expecting to have generated or recovered by $8 million by virtue of our own efforts. It is the Commonwealth's assistance that gets us there by June 2023, and we will have a further target to achieve for June 2024. Thanks, Mr Martin. I resolve that Council notes the information provided in the report, NERC Investment Report, as at 31 October 2022, and I'll now move to item. There are no items from the Manager of Economic Development at part 12 of the business paper, so I'll move to part 13. Item 13.1 is a report on electronic lock and key security system from ASSA Abloy. And I'll ask you, Mr Roy, to speak to this report.
Thank you, Mr Administrator. The purpose of this report is table details on an estimated cost of electronic lock system and key system for consideration inclusion in the 23-24 budget. The system, which is supplied by ASSA Abloy, will facilitate greater management, security and lockout controls, while at the same time providing detailed access to audit trails on all council assets across the island. What we have found over time, over the last 12 months particularly, is that we don't have the ability to track who's entering into our assets, whether it be buildings or parcels of land or physical vehicles ourselves. So this process for the next financial year is consideration of adopting a locking strategy and mechanism so that we can basically track who's coming in and out of our facilities. Before you today is a I guess, a number of locks that you will see in the proposals from Asa Abloy. Over the last 6 months, Alan McConnell, who works in the project office here at Council, has been looking at all the locks, along with Kim Vanderkevy as well, who works in our IT department, to identify which locks would be best suited to which buildings, gates, access areas at the airport, particularly from a security perspective. And they've come up with a strategy which we put before you today for consideration for the 23-24 budget. So we would like you to consider the Asa Abloy product, basically to look after our asset management moving forward for Council.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. You've provided an extensive amount of information on this proposal. And I asked you offline, but I'll just ask you so that people in the community who are interested in this item may also hear the response. My understanding is that we are not dealing direct with Asa Abloy here, but there are providers who can provide that product, a number of providers, and that when we get to the point of wanting to go to the market for quotations or tenders or whatever our procurement arrangement will be around an order of this size, that there would be a competitive process for that procurement.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there will be a competitive process, and there will be a standard tender on our website, which the local locksmiths on the island will be able to put in a submission at the time.
Right, based on being able to supply this product.
Absolutely.
Or this series of products. Okay. Look, I've had experience in other places with the Asa Abloy products. I know that you know, they're very highly regarded from a security and ease of use, accessibility perspective. So I support the direction that you're heading, and I resolve that Council endorses this report on managing the security and access to all its assets across the island, makes provision in the amount of $112,846 in the 2023-2024 budget to implement the above strategy of moving to an electronic lock system, seeks 3 quotes from appropriately qualified locksmiths to implement this system, establishes a register from March 2023 to commence management of the new system to be allocated once installed, and informs the community of the security change to allow community members to come forward and declare access to council assets in their current form prior to the implementation of the new system. So resolved, and I will move now to item 14.1, which is the waste equipment tender report. Mr. Roy, are you passing to Mr. Reid?
Absolutely, Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Acting General Manager and Mr. Administrator.
Over to you, Mr. Reid.
Thank you. The report before you is now a third paper in relation to waste equipment tender that we've been running following considerable funding provided by the Commonwealth Government for new waste and recycling equipment for our waste management operations. This specific paper is in relation to a new excavator. We had been deliberating over the tender submissions over the last month and a half to understand the capacity of the excavators put towards us with regards to construction and demolition waste. And so we've waited until now to provide the recommendation on the appropriate machine for that. So the machine we're recommending is a JCB JS200LC, which is sized appropriately so that we can, amongst other things, lift vehicles, remove engine blocks from vehicles, and can perform other work to move around construction and demolition waste, which this machine will be required to do. The price provided by CEA, who is the supplier for that machine, includes not just the machine but the appropriate attachments that we need for that machine, to perform that work specifically for construction and demolition waste. I will note, I've just picked up in the paper that just under the discussion, it actually refers to the weighbridge. That is a typo, and I think we'll need to.
Can you just point me to that?
Yeah, so that's on page 159.
158 as well.
Yeah, so within the background section of the report, it talks about all machines that we went to tender for, but under the discussion, that should state that the following were the number of responses received for the excavator resulting from the tender, and then the first dot point should say excavator. I will note that the tender responses is correct. It was 7 tenderers for the excavator. However, the words in that section there where it states weighbridge should state excavator.
So under the heading discussion, the first sentence, weighbridge should be excavator.
Yep.
And also in the
first dot point, correct. Yeah. And then, sorry, in the final paragraph before the title relevance to the strategic plan, it once again states weighbridge, which should state excavator.
Okay, so I'd be asking that the people who look after the recording of the business paper make those adjustments. I want to follow through so that, because that is a significant change to the report itself, that we should have corrected for the permanent record.
Sure.
Thank you. Keep going.
That is the summary of that paper, Mr Administrator. So we are recommending that Council award the tender for a JCB JS 200 LC excavator with relevant attachments for demolition to CEA for the price of $337,600.
Okay, and just one question in terms of if Council were to place this order now, what will be given the freight situation?
Yes.
What are the proposed delivery arrangements?
So for the supplier, the arrangements is that they deliver to the Port of Brisbane, and for this particular machine, it's an 8 to 10 week delivery period. We're still, I guess, deliberating internally here at Council the best method by which we can bring it to Ireland. But I think pending the unloading of the vessel that Council has currently commissioned, we would seek a similar operation to bring the excavator as well as the shredder that we've agreed to purchasing through a similar method to Ireland. Hoping at this point in time that we'd be looking for around a March delivery to Ireland for those pieces of equipment.
Right, so we're talking about our own vessel or some other format?
We're sort of leaving our options open at this point. There is the potential to use the service in the market from NPDL with their barge. They have indicated that they could deliver this larger machinery through an alternative method, although, as I understand, it would still be with a barge service. We haven't made that decision yet. But nonetheless, we would still ideally like to get both those two large machines in particular to Ireland around that March time frame next year.
Because the attraction of what we're doing with the present voyage is that there were vast volumes of other council freight that needed to be shifted. Are we going to have more materials, similar sort of arrangements coming up, or we're just looking at 2 items of plant?
Yeah, Mr Administrator, there is a number of items moving into next year, particularly the drill rig, which is another significant piece of equipment that we would look to bring to Ireland at that point in time. There is also a number of pieces of equipment on the waste side, as well as roads moving forward, where another shipment in around that March-April space would be very beneficial for the island moving forward.
Okay, thank you. I resolve the Council award the tender for a JCB JS 200 LC excavator with relevant attachments for demolition to CEA for $337,600 delivered to Brisbane. Is that right?
Correct.
We'll just include that in the resolution. Brisbane Port.
Port of Brisbane, yeah.
Okay, and I'll move now to item 14.2, which is a report on the proposed Norfolk Island wastewater management strategy. Mr. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator, and once again, this paper is from Mr. Reid.
Thank you.
Mr. Acting General Manager and Mr. Administrator. The paper drafted here is, as the title suggests, a proposal for a Norfolk Island wastewater management strategy. I think it's important to mention that at the current time, there are significant concerns around water quality on island. There have been over a number of years, probably decades, fair to say. In particular, the water quality within the Kingston catchment and the impacts that that has had on water as a resource, in particular groundwater, but more recently the impacts that have been observed on the marine park, particularly the areas of Emily and Slaughter Bays. Council is a party to a group that's been set up here on island called the Water Quality Working Group, which also includes representatives from the Department of Infrastructure and Parks Australia. And that group has been meeting routinely since the start of 2021 to discuss this as an issue and contribute, if you like, as a group to the actions that each party is bringing to the table to help resolve that issue. Like other local government areas, Norfolk Island Regional Council does have an obligation to manage wastewater, both in terms of infrastructure, reticulated sewer, but also wastewater at the property level for be they residences or businesses or other types of properties here on Norfolk Island. To digress a little bit, the legislative framework here on island is unlike other local government areas, and other local government areas in particular within state jurisdictions when it comes to management of wastewater for local government, and it makes it particularly complex. And we're aware that there is an ongoing dialogue and work being conducted by the Department of Infrastructure in considering potential legislative changes to make that simpler to administer and to be more effective. With regards to this proposed strategy, Council believes that we should be taking a forward-looking approach in regards to plans for reticulated sewer. There are, if you like, loose plans on the part of Council in the past to install reticulated sewer in various areas around the island, but those plans are not documented anywhere. As well as the fact that the Department of Infrastructure themselves are planned and have committed funding to install reticulated sewer within the Kingston catchment, in particular the World Heritage area. So we believe that this paper should be developed to help in an infrastructure planning sense, and of course to sewer certain areas of the island, in particular Kingston, will have what we understand to be an improvement, a significant improvement, we believe, on water quality within that catchment. And at the same time, we think this strategy could serve to give us some direction, both in terms of our current legislative framework, but also future potential changes to legislation when it comes to working with landholders on island to improve their on-site wastewater management systems, old septics or newer systems that have been installed, such as aerated wastewater treatment systems. So I believe this document will serve Council well in its infrastructure planning and its regulatory services, and we intend to embark on this in the new year. We expect that we would engage a consultant to assist us in drafting the strategy, but would take considerable input from staff in my team to develop the strategy, but to give those consultants an understanding of the peculiar circumstances we find ourselves when it comes to the management of wastewater on Norfolk Island. In that vein, I do recommend to you, Mr. Administrator, that we draft a wastewater management strategy for Norfolk Island.
Thank you. Just a question. You've referred to the group and it's spelled out in the report, the composition of that group. How does this align with, or has this been aligned with or discussed with our Sustainability Advisory Committee framework, or are these things
Mutually exclusive. The Water Quality Working Group hasn't had an interface with that Sustainability Advisory Group to date, no.
Is there a reason for that?
The Water Quality Working Group has more or less been structured around government agencies and the actions that they can conduct or have been able to conduct in the last couple of years in this space. It has been raised, not so much through the Sustainability Advisory Committee, but from community members about community representation in that vein. Certainly in terms of this strategy, separate to that Water Quality Working Group, there would be a consultation process whereby the document would be put on public exhibition for the community to comment on before it would be finalised and adopted by council. And it's my intent that the document would also be taken through our Sustainability Advisory Committee for their comment as well. So,
is there a way to build that into, the steps that we're proposing here today? So at some point, the community will take back responsibility for what council is now doing under the period of administration. And my thinking, or what I'm wondering, without directing how this should be managed, is, whether we can involve our own committee in the process in some way as we go forward, or whether that's not necessarily appropriate in the particular circumstances that you're trying to address at the moment. How do you see it?
If I could be candid for a moment, there is, I'll admit, a concern within the community, but when it comes, well, not just to the management of wastewater through on-site wastewater management systems, but also through the need to connect to reticulated sewer, around the impost that would have on landowners and where that cost lies. I think it's important for the community to have their say. At this point in time, I would see it appropriate to run the strategy through the advisory committee, but I'm also cognizant in perhaps the buy-in that advisory committee may have in findings or clear outcomes of that strategy that would ultimately mean a financial impost on landholders to improve the standard of the septics on their site, or that need to pay the cost of connecting to a reticulated sewer. And in that sense, I'd be cautious in the degree to which we engage that advisory committee on the findings of that strategy. But by taking it to them for their comment, I think it gives them the opportunity to make their comment to whatever degree that they're comfortable with. But I wouldn't be overly keen in forcing their endorsement, if you like, of that strategy, knowing that there may be some prickly points at the end of it.
Is it worth trying to include them with a seat at the table? Say, this would need the concurrence of the other group members, but perhaps a seat for the chair. How is council represented at the group? Is that by yourself?
By myself and by one of my staff members. And just on focusing on this strategy at this point, the Water Quality Working Group, as I've made clear, that it's not a constituted group, it's just a group that we've brought together because we feel that there's been, up until the start of last year, quite a lot of activity in efforts to improve water quality, but not a lot of understanding across government agencies and not a lot of coordination. And so that's been the intent of it. Without sounding exclusive, it was not really the intent that was going to be a sounding board for community consultation. Now, I think it's probably, if there was an endeavour to get community representation in that group, that's something that would be best served by other members of that Water Quality Working Group, not just ourselves, and would probably need to rethink the purpose of that group at the same time.
Right. So you're sticking to your recommendation
at this time,
at this stage. if I was to add a clause that says at the appropriate stage, consideration be given to including the SAC. In future discussions as to the way forward for wastewater management. I'll read that again. So that'll become paragraph E, which would be at the appropriate stage, consideration be given to including the Sustainability Advisory Committee in future discussions as to the way forward for wastewater management on Island. Would that be inappropriate?
Yep. I think that that's fair, and I think it doesn't make it specific to the water quality working group either. It's I guess across the breadth of activities at least the council will do in managing wastewater for the island.
Yeah, where we go on this topic, as I see it, is a critical sustainability issue. We have a committee that we hope to engage in sustainability generally, and that covers a multitude of topics. I would not like us to just move forward without at least acknowledging that at some point in time there would be a role for this committee.
Sure.
Part of that process.
Absolutely. Yep.
That's how I see it. Okay, well, if you think that's an acceptable compromise, then I resolve the council undertake to develop a wastewater management strategy for Norfolk Island, including A, planning for future reticulated sewer within a specific timeframe. B, focus for areas requiring upgrades to existing on-site wastewater management systems. C, consideration of incentives to upgrade on-site wastewater management systems and improve water quality outcomes. D, implementation of regulation, both existing and likely future legislation. And B, at the appropriate stage, consideration be given to including the Sustainability Advisory Committee in future discussions as to the way forward for wastewater management on Norfolk Island. So resolved. Now, Mr. Roy, I think that deals with all of the substantive items on the agenda. It takes us to, we have item 16, presentations. We did have a presentation from the auditor, from Jacob Sauer. There are no notices of motion. There are no reports from the manager customer care. Correct. Is there any urgent business without notice?
There is no urgent business without notice.
There are no confidential matters for consideration.
No.
There are no questions for the next meeting.
No.
That brings us to the close. Have I missed anything, Mr. Roy?
Mr. Administrator, you haven't missed anything.
Then in that case, I'll declare the meeting closed at 3:01 p.m. And I thank everyone for their attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator.